Zelda Breath of the Wild was an incredible game when it came out, and 6 years later, it is still one of the best games of all time. But that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to complain. So what does Tears of the Kingdom need to be a step above its predecessor? Perhaps more Korok seeds? Maybe more rainstorms? Or maybe more gyro puzzles? I'm looking for what I want to see in Tears of the Kingdom. Well, in that case, let's talk about my biggest hopes and wishes for Tears of the Kingdom, starting out with one of the most disappointing aspects of Breath of the Wild, the bosses. Now, I love the overworld bosses, all 3.5 of them. The Hinox, Talus, and Madolga are all interesting fights in their own, and terrifying the first time you stumble upon them. And the Lynels, which aren't even technically bosses, are still terrifying on your 4th playthrough. But the Divine Beasts? After solving an entire dungeon, all you see is a Blight Ganon. After the first Divine Beast, it might look cool, but by the 4th, it's boring and overdone. Zelda games are known for its great dungeons, but a dungeon is only as good as its final challenge. That's why Monk Maz Koshia was such a cool boss, and why Calamity Ganon was such a disappointment. So one of my biggest hopes for Tears of the Kingdom is to have better bosses, if not mechanically, visually. And while we're at it, maybe add some more overworld bosses. But we'll get back to that in the future. Whenever I play other Zelda games then come back to Breath of the Wild, there's always one thing I miss over all other abandoned Zelda conventions. And no, it's not dungeons, or items, or even companions. I miss the heart pieces. Whether they're hidden in the world or rewards for minigames, I want heart pieces back. I wish for Tears of the Kingdom to have hidden heart pieces similar to the Korok seeds, but with harder puzzles. And without hidden heart pieces, minigames feel pointless as the only reward is rupees, and the overworld just feels a little bit more lacking than it has to be. And that leads me to my next wish, which is to have a full 20 hearts and full stamina wheels. No more that missing 3 hearts nonsense or having to exploit the game to fill it out. Let us 100% our Zelda game and make it look like it. Bokoblins suck. No need to sugarcoat it. I'm tired of seeing Bokoblins, Moblins, and Lizalfos. We need more enemy types in Tears of the Kingdom, and enemy ranks need to be more visually different than just changing the color. Now, I'm aware the art book for Tears of the Kingdom has leaked revealing enemies and such, but I won't be using anything learned from that and rather just pretend it doesn't exist. Overall, we just need more from the enemies in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, in Breath of the Wild, there's an often unappreciated completionist quest of the Hyrule Compendium. I really find searching for all enemies and items to take pictures to be really fun, and with the right reward this time, I think it should absolutely be in Tears of the Kingdom. Although Breath of the Wild isn't exactly known for its stellar completionist rewards, which leads me to my next point. Better completionist rewards. Now, as tedious as it sounds, I honestly don't mind the fact that there's an ungodly amount of Korok seeds, but after spending hundreds of hours searching for 900 Korok seeds, only to be given literal crap, I don't know if I should laugh or cry. So overall, more like that, please.
Hero of Hyrule, chosen by the sword that seals the darkness.
When it comes to voice acting in video games, well, let's just say Breath of the Wild is not the shining example. In fact, I think I've seen PlayStation 1 games with more voice acting than Breath of the Wild. But that's exactly the problem. Breath of the Wild has great voice acting, but is awful when it comes to decide if they're going to include it or not. You see, when you start a conversation with Impa or other main characters, it starts the dialogue out with voice acting, but immediately goes to text without any voice acting, and it's really jarring. Now, for the longest time, Breath of the Wild was the only open world game I'd ever played, but I've recently gotten into Horizon Zero Dawn, and every NPC, no matter how small, has voice acting for every line. And I don't necessarily need that from Tears of the Kingdom, but I've noticed with that little bit more effort made from the developers, it made the world of Horizon feel more real and not feel like this. And continuing on the sound design front, I know I want something relating to the music, but honestly, every time I think about it, I can't decide whether I want music to be more similar to past Zelda games or more of the same. On one hand, the past Zelda games all have incredible headbangers that I could listen to in my sleep or in a workout, but yet again, Breath of the Wild has the perfect music for the world it's trying to represent. Each song presents a peaceful yet melancholic feel which perfectly fits the destroyed world of Breath of the Wild, with its ruins being replaced with forest and nature. All I can really hope is it's sort of a combination of the two types of music, and I mean, if the trailer music is anything to go off of, then I'm sure we have nothing to worry about. No DLC. I could say more, but I'd like to speak more extensively about this another time. Now, to boil down my argument, I believe DLC is the worst thing they could do for Tears of the Kingdom because it can lead to the initial base game feeling incomplete in hindsight. To add on to this idea is for the Master Mode to be included in the box without another purchase. Breath of the Wild initially had a rather easy difficulty, and honestly, Master Mode isn't much harder, but I wish for Tears of the Kingdom to leave the option available for anyone who wants to choose to play on a higher difficulty. On that, I could also request an easier difficulty for accessibility's sake, but I'll let others argue on that since we're about to get into the meaty stuff. Now, another shorter one, as I've already made a video going in depth on this, but I really hope they don't make any more trailers for Tears of the Kingdom, and overall don't announce anything more than they have now. If you want to see my full thoughts on this, be sure to check out that video in the eye corner after you finish this one. Now here I want to talk about the overall feel of Hyrule and how they could hopefully make it better. Now, once again, Breath of the Wild is an amazing game, but in my many hours of playing, there's just a few things I think they could have done differently. For example, the fast travel. When I play Breath of the Wild, there's only two ways I ever move from place to place: Shrine Teleportation or the Master Cycle. I hardly ever try any other ways of transportation because, for one, there hardly is any other options in the first place, since the only real option are horses and wind bombs, and I don't want to ride horses because I'm stubborn and wind bombs are too hard for my soft little brain. So, Master Cycle it is. Now, hopefully the buildable vehicles from the Nuts and Bolts trailer can fix my first issue, but even with the best vehicles, I will still rarely decide to walk when I can teleport. Which brings me to my second point: teleportation. So, what can they do about that? Well, in this case, I think rather than removing teleporting completely, I believe what they should do is make all the other options more appealing than teleporting. Again, in Horizon, you can fast travel, but you have to use limited resources to craft and build the fast travel kits. And only later in the game can you buy an infinite fast travel. I think if Tears of the Kingdom made so fast travel, at least early in the game, is less appealing than other forms of transport, it'll allow us to enjoy the world far more. And what should be in that new world? Well, along with the new skies and caves shown in the trailers, I hope for the land of Hyrule itself to see change as well. Why would we want to play the same world again, but with 2 more layers added to it? We wouldn't, which is exactly why I hope to see new life brought into Hyrule. Now, we saw part of this in the first game when we saw the construction of Tarrytown, and I hope, since this game has been years after the events of Breath of the Wild, to see other products of Bolson construction, and have many more towns in Hyrule where ruins once were. And maybe this is a bit too out there, but maybe to have NPCs with stories as deep and as rich as many of them had in Majora's Mask. I believe if they make Hyrule feel more like a lively and calmed place, it could give more emphasis to the beauty of the skies and the darkness of the caverns. And with all of that, it brings me to my final hope, which is to see more of the new champions. In Breath of the Wild, we learned very little, but some of the history of the champions who died 100 years ago. And I'd argue that seeing the champions' relationships is one of the most important things to have kept Breath of the Wild stories from flopping. Loving Mipha, absolutely adoring Daruk, admiring Urbosa, and absolutely despising Rivali is all where my love of Breath of the Wild story came from. And spending more time with these champions in Age of Calamity was one of the best things I could have asked for. And now, as we near closer to Tears of the Kingdom, I would wish nothing more than for us to see the champions. But since, they died, I suppose I could live with these new ones. But in all seriousness, I would love to see more quests with Teba, who is infinitely better than Rivali, or sand surfing with Riju, and whatever Yunobo likes doing, I guess getting pain meds, and I'll do anything with Sidon. Where was I? Oh, yeah, more champions and more Sidon. Doesn't need to be integral for the story, just let me get a coffee with Sidon. Anyways, that's mostly everything I can think of for now, but when I inevitably have more, I'll be sure to make another part to this. And if you enjoyed this video, I really recommend you check out my other video I mentioned earlier about why I don't want to see any more information about Tears of the Kingdom. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe, since next week I'll be conducting an experiment on which incarnation of Zelda is the hottest scientifically. And until next time, bye! Oh crap, I forgot about King Dorfim. More of him too.